Welcome to this week's Bible reading and my reflections. This week's Bible reading is from Luke's Gospel, chapter 13, and I'm starting to read at verse 10. On a Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues, and a woman was there who had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. When Jesus saw her, he called her forward and said to her, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." Then he put his hands on her, and immediately she straightened up and praised God. Indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, the synagogue ruler said to the people, "There are 6 days for work, so come and be healed on those days, not on the Sabbath." The Lord answered him, "You hypocrites! Doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from what bound her?" When he said this, all his opponents were humiliated, but the people were delighted with all the wonderful things he was doing. We at Wyoming Anglican are trying to be a church like Jesus. That's one of the posts I recently wrote on our church Facebook page. I wrote a bit more. I thought I'd better choose some words to describe Jesus for those who have no idea what he is like. I wonder what words you would have chosen. I chose welcoming, loving, and generous. Those in need who came to Jesus were welcomed by him, were loved by him, and received his generosity. He was generous with his time, his attention, his gifts. He didn't brush people off. Those in need who met with Jesus left the encounter with him feeling better in different ways. My hope is that all who come to us in need feel better in different ways, because we have treated them in the same way that Jesus treated such people. We welcome people. We love them as people loved by God and made, as we all are, in the image of God. And we are generous with people, with our time, our attention, our gifts. However, not everyone who encountered Jesus left feeling better. He ruffled feathers. He challenged people. He made some feel deeply uncomfortable. Mary, Jesus's mother, had some foreknowledge that it wouldn't be easy for everyone when Jesus came into the world. Before his birth, drawing on what she knew from the Jewish scriptures, our Old Testament, she predicted that it wouldn't be easy for the proud, for those in power, and for the rich. In Mary's song of praise before the birth of Jesus, she wrote of what the Messiah would bring about, as though it had already happened. They're quoting from Luke chapter 1, verses 50 to 53. His mercy extends to those who fear him from generation to generation. He has performed mighty deeds with his arm. He has scattered those who are proud in their inmost thoughts. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but has sent the rich away empty. The Messiah's coming meant life was going to change for the better for those who fear God, those who had reverence for God and his holiness, and for the humble, and for the poor. But it wasn't going to be so good for the proud, the rulers, and the rich. In today's gospel reading, we see these words being fulfilled. We heard about one person who left the encounter with Jesus now free and praising God. She was raised up. Her life was changed for the better, while others left the encounter humiliated. The scene is a synagogue. Most towns in Galilee would have had a synagogue. It is a Saturday, the Sabbath, the day when the community gathered together for worship and learning together. The Sabbath was a day that was a gift of God to his people for stepping away from the usual daily patterns of work, a day of rest. Jesus is at the synagogue and he is teaching, so not so restful for him. Amongst the congregation is a woman who Jesus notices. she wouldn't have been sitting near the front because it was the men who sat at the front. The women would sit separately, either at the back behind the men or in a special balcony section. This particular woman isn't very tall. She's short. We know this because we're told she was bent over and couldn't straighten up. Perhaps she had arthritis or osteoporosis. These were not medical conditions known to Jesus's contemporaries. She is described in the passage as being crippled by a spirit for 18 years. So I imagine because she was short, she wouldn't have been very easy to spot in a crowd. She wouldn't have been very prominent amongst the congregation. But Jesus sees her, and Jesus calls her forward to the front so that now everyone can see her. He speaks to her, "Woman, you are set free from your infirmity." And Jesus puts his hand on her, and Luke tells us immediately she straightened up and praised God. What happens next? You would have thought that everyone in the congregation is thrilled for her and can't quite believe the miracle they've just witnessed Jesus perform, and they too start praising God. If you had been there, perhaps that would have been your reaction. In the synagogue on this particular occasion, on witnessing Jesus perform this miracle, some of those there, the people, were delighted with all the wonderful things Jesus was doing. But not all. There are a group of them who are not delighted. They are indignant. And one of them speaks up on their behalf, the ruler of the synagogue, the one who up to now was in charge of the meeting and how things were run, the one who had authority in this place. As we listen to his words, we might wonder what his problem is. Why is he not thrilled at what he has witnessed? Why is he not delighted like the people were with all the wonderful things Jesus was doing? Could it be issues of power and control? Could it be that he was wanting to be recognized as the one in control who had authority and power and was not willing to relinquish that power to anyone, including to Jesus, the Son of God, Jesus who was challenging his position? The synagogue ruler doesn't speak to Jesus, but he speaks to the people. He is trying to assert his authority again amongst the congregation. They need to follow the Jewish law, he tells them, and he reminds them what it is. There are 6 days for work, so he instructs them to come and be healed on those 6 days, not the Sabbath, not the day of rest. Jesus doesn't let his words pass. Jesus challenges him. He challenges his attitudes. He can see how this man and others were using God's word for their own ends. Jesus can see that they are lacking in love and compassion. They have no compassion for the woman and her situation, and Jesus calls them out. You hypocrites, it looks like you are really interested in keeping God's laws and in doing what God wants you to do, but actually you use and abuse God's words for your own ends and show no compassion. You're perfectly happy looking after your animals on a Sabbath, untying them on a Sabbath so that they can have some water, but you don't care a jot about this woman who is part of your faith family, a daughter of Abraham. You are critical because I freed her on the Sabbath from what has been binding her for 18 years? Really? That's my paraphrase, my expansion of Jesus's words. His actual words are these: you hypocrites, doesn't each of you on the Sabbath untie your ox or donkey from the stall and lead it out to give it water? Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath day from what bound her? Jesus's words have the effect of humiliating his opponents, Luke tells us, of bringing them low, doing what Mary said he would do, scattering those who are proud in their inmost thoughts and bringing down rulers from their thrones. He's showing them up for what they are. We don't know which particular synagogue Jesus is visiting, but I don't imagine that the ruler of this synagogue or the other leaders are going to be welcoming him again and inviting him to teach them. Who likes being humiliated? Some of us will identify with the woman in this account. We are already humble and are in need. We long for Jesus to give us freedom from whatever is binding us. We are longing for Jesus to say to us, woman or man, you are set free from your infirmity, whatever that infirmity is. And perhaps he will say that and do that for us today. I wonder if any of you identify with the ruler of the synagogue. It's easy to say, no, that's not me. I'm not interested in keeping my power and authority in this place. I'm willing for Jesus to come and show me new ways and to show me where I've misunderstood his will. But let's take a moment to reflect whether at times we are like this ruler. Perhaps we all have our moments of holding on when what we need to do is have a change of heart and mind and be taught by Jesus. As a church which is striving to be like Jesus, there are some issues for us to ponder. We can strive to treat people as Jesus treated the woman, welcoming her, loving her, and being generous to her. But should we be challenging people as Jesus challenged the ruler of the synagogue? And if yes, when and where and how? We're not Jesus. We don't have his insights, his wisdom. We need to tread very cautiously here. Jesus also said to love our enemies. Does love sometimes involve humiliating people? Surely there will be times when we can't let go whatever is said. We need to challenge if what has been said is contrary to the gospel we proclaim, or what we understand as Jesus's will for us. I've had a moment of challenge this week when I felt I needed to respond to something I fundamentally disagree with. A group of conservatives, some would say fundamentalist Anglicans, setting up a new denomination in Australia. They have done so because they don't agree with the likes of the bishop, our bishop, Bishop Peter. They regard him as no longer having any leadership role in the church because he has not banned clergy in this diocese from blessing same-sex marriages. They're calling him and those of us who interpret the Bible differently from them unbiblical, apostates, not Christians. And at one stage, one of them told us to leave the church. My response posted on Facebook was as follows. We at Wyoming Anglican Church take the Bible seriously, but read on. The Bible is a complex book. In the past, the church looked at certain passages in the Bible and thought that slavery was compatible with God's will. That was its traditional teaching. That is no longer the case. Slavery is now considered an abomination. Is the church now ignoring what the Bible clearly teaches? Is the church now being unbiblical? That was what some Christians were saying when individuals were questioning and looking again at the issues of slavery. Now we would say, no, the church is not being unbiblical. It has now looked at other passages in the Bible, passages where slavery isn't even mentioned, to understand God's view of humanity. From this wider perspective, the church has united in its view that slavery is incompatible with our Christian faith. I thank God for those who had the courage and challenge the traditional teaching of the church, and I thank God that the church did not stick with what it thought it knew. What has the church learned from its past misunderstandings and mistakes with regard our reading of the Bible? We can take some passages of the Bible and say the Bible clearly teaches, but that got us into trouble with slavery. We can say that we must stick with the traditional teaching of the church, but that got us into trouble with slavery. Why are some within the church so sure that you need only look at certain passages of the Bible in order to discern God's will with regard how the LGBTQI plus community are to order their lives? Why not look at the wider teaching in the Bible, as was done over the issue of slavery? Why do some in the church say that we should not depart from the traditional teaching of the church on this particular issue when they are happy to do so for other issues? May we join with Jesus in his prayer for unity for his church, remembering that he is the truth. May we gather round him and be united in him. There are other responses you can read online. I particularly commend to you Matthew Anstey's response. The church trying to be like Jesus, loving and challenging. It's tricky. It's tricky deciding what Jesus would have us say. My rule of thumb is, when in doubt, always err on the side of love and grace, because I don't see Jesus criticizing those who do that.